In 1846, a young dentist in Hartford, Connecticut performed the first successful public demonstration of surgical anesthesia, eliminating pain during medical procedures and revolutionizing the practice of medicine forever. Horace Wells discovered that inhaling nitrous oxide could render patients unconscious and insensitive to pain, a breakthrough that would save billions of people from suffering over the next 2 centuries. Yet within 5 years of his discovery, he died by suicide in a psychiatric asylum, destroyed by the theft of his invention, professional betrayal, and the failure of the medical establishment to recognize his genius. Horace Wells was born in 1815 in Hartford, Vermont, during an era when surgical procedures were conducted on fully conscious patients who screamed in agony. Medical operations were nightmares of unimaginable pain where patients had to be physically restrained by multiple assistants while surgeons worked as quickly as possible. The terror of surgical pain meant that people often chose death over medical treatment, allowing diseases and injuries to kill them rather than enduring the horror of conscious surgery. Surgical speed was valued over precision because every second prolonged unbearable suffering. The discovery of anesthesia would transform this barbaric reality into humane medical practice. Wells established a dental practice in Hartford, Connecticut in 1842, building a reputation as a skilled and compassionate dentist. He was innovative by nature, constantly seeking better methods and materials for dental procedures. Tooth extraction in that era was excruciating, and Wells was troubled by the pain he necessarily inflicted on patients who needed his services. He began experimenting with various substances that might reduce pain, though the concept of chemical anesthesia did not yet exist in medical science. His compassion for suffering patients drove his search for a solution that the entire medical profession had failed to discover. In December 1844, Wells attended a public exhibition of nitrous oxide, commonly known as laughing gas, a popular entertainment of that era. A traveling showman named Gardner Colton demonstrated the effects of the gas, inviting audience members to inhale it and experience its euphoric effects. Wells observed that one participant, Samuel Cooley, injured his leg while under the influence of the gas but seemed completely unaware of the pain. This observation sparked an immediate realization in Wells's mind that nitrous oxide might eliminate pain during medical procedures. He recognized that what others saw as mere entertainment might be the solution to one of medicine's greatest challenges. The very next day, Wells arranged for Gardner Colton to bring nitrous oxide to his dental office. In an act of extraordinary courage, Wells volunteered to be the experimental subject, having another dentist extract one of his own teeth while he was under the influence of the gas. The tooth extraction was performed successfully, and Wells awoke reporting that he had felt no pain whatsoever. This self-experiment proved that nitrous oxide could eliminate pain during surgical procedures, a discovery that should have made Wells one of the most celebrated figures in medical history. He had given humanity the gift of painless surgery through his own bravery and scientific insight. If you want to discover more tragic stories of brilliant innovators whose discoveries were stolen and whose lives were destroyed by betrayal, subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you never miss these heartbreaking accounts of genius unrewarded. Wells immediately began using nitrous oxide in his dental practice, performing painless tooth extractions that amazed his patients. Word of his anesthesia technique spread rapidly through Hartford and surrounding communities. Patients who had delayed necessary dental work out of fear now sought treatment from the dentist who could eliminate pain. Wells documented his cases carefully, keeping detailed records of successful anesthesia administrations. He believed that his discovery would revolutionize medicine and that he would be recognized as a great medical pioneer. In January 1845, Wells traveled to Boston to demonstrate his anesthesia technique at Massachusetts General Hospital before the medical establishment. He was invited by a former student and partner named William Morton, a dentist who had worked in Wells's practice. The public demonstration was arranged at the invitation of John Collins Warren, a prominent surgeon and professor at Harvard Medical School. This demonstration represented Wells's opportunity to prove his discovery to the most prestigious medical authorities in America. Success would establish nitrous oxide anesthesia as standard medical practice and secure Wells's place in history. The demonstration was a catastrophic failure that destroyed Wells's reputation and haunted him for the rest of his life. Wells attempted to anesthetize a patient for a tooth extraction before an audience of medical students and physicians. The patient cried out during the procedure, leading the audience to conclude that the anesthesia had failed completely. Medical students mocked Wells, calling him a charlatan and a fraud, while professors dismissed his claims as delusional. Wells left Boston humiliated and professionally ruined, though the patient later stated he had felt only slight discomfort rather than the usual excruciating pain. The failure likely resulted from Wells removing the nitrous oxide apparatus too soon, before the patient was deeply anesthetized. The public demonstration format created pressure that may have caused Wells to rush the procedure. The medical establishment of that era was skeptical of dramatic innovations and quick to ridicule anything that seemed like quackery. A single failed demonstration was enough to permanently discredit Wells in the eyes of Boston physicians, despite his numerous successful cases in Hartford. This professional disaster marked the beginning of Wells's tragic descent. Within months of Wells's humiliation, his former partner William Morton began experimenting with ether as an anesthetic agent. Morton consulted with Charles Jackson, a chemist who suggested using sulfuric ether instead of nitrous oxide. In October 1846, Morton performed a public demonstration at Massachusetts General Hospital using ether anesthesia successfully. This demonstration, conducted in the same operating theater where Wells had failed, was hailed as a triumph of medical science. Morton was celebrated as the discoverer of anesthesia, receiving praise and recognition that should have belonged to Wells. The theft of Wells's discovery was deliberate and calculated. Morton had learned about anesthesia principles while working in Wells's practice and had witnessed Wells's successful nitrous oxide administrations. He simply substituted a different anesthetic agent and claimed the entire concept as his own innovation. Charles Jackson also claimed credit, leading to bitter patent disputes between Morton and Jackson over anesthesia rights. Neither man acknowledged Wells's priority, instead fighting each other over an invention they had both stolen. Wells watched in anguish as others received credit, fame, and financial rewards for his discovery. Ether anesthesia spread rapidly throughout American and European medicine, transforming surgical practice exactly as Wells had predicted. Surgeons could now perform complex operations that had been impossible when patients writhed in agony. The medical revolution Wells had initiated was attributed to Morton and Jackson, while Wells's name was forgotten or dismissed. The professional and personal devastation of seeing his life's greatest achievement stolen destroyed Wells psychologically. Wells attempted to reclaim credit for his discovery through published articles and appeals to medical societies. He wrote detailed accounts of his nitrous oxide experiments and his priority in discovering anesthesia principles. He sought testimony from patients he had treated and colleagues who had witnessed his early successes. The medical establishment largely ignored his claims, having already accepted Morton as the anesthesia pioneer. Wells's insistence on his rightful credit was interpreted as the desperate claims of a failed practitioner rather than legitimate historical correction. The psychological toll of this injustice combined with other personal and professional disasters to break Wells's mental health. He abandoned dentistry and attempted various business ventures that all failed. He became dependent on chloroform, another anesthetic agent he had experimented with, using it to escape his depression and despair. His chemical dependency worsened his mental state, creating a downward spiral of addiction and psychological deterioration. By 1848, Wells was exhibiting signs of severe mental illness that his family and friends could not ignore. In January 1848, Wells traveled to Paris hoping to find recognition in Europe that American medicine had denied him. French physicians were more receptive to his claims, and the French Academy of Sciences was investigating the question of who truly discovered anesthesia. However, Wells's mental condition was deteriorating rapidly, and he could not effectively advocate for himself. He returned to New York City in a state of profound psychological distress, his hopes of vindication crushed. The combination of professional failure, stolen credit, and chemical addiction had destroyed his sanity. On January 21, 1848, while imprisoned in Tombs Prison in New York City for allegedly throwing sulfuric acid on women in the street, Wells died by suicide. He had been arrested during what appears to have been a psychotic episode induced by chloroform intoxication. In his cell, Wells used a razor to sever his femoral artery, bleeding to death at the age of 33. His final letter to his wife expressed profound regret and acknowledged that he could no longer bear the suffering of his existence. The man who had eliminated pain for millions died in agony, both physical and psychological, in a prison cell. The tragedy of Horace Wells's death shocked those who had known him and sparked renewed investigation into his anesthesia claims. The American Medical Association eventually recognized Wells as the discoverer of anesthesia, acknowledging that his work with nitrous oxide preceded Morton's ether demonstrations. The American Dental Association honored him as the founder of surgical anesthesia, correcting the historical record that had excluded him. These posthumous recognitions came too late to save Wells from his tragic fate or to give him the professional satisfaction he deserved during his lifetime. The vindication he desperately sought arrived only after his death. The scientific legacy of Wells's discovery is almost immeasurable in its impact on human welfare. Anesthesia transformed surgery from a horrifying last resort into a routine medical procedure that could save lives and improve health. Complex operations that required hours became possible when patients could remain unconscious and pain-free. Childbirth pain could be eliminated, sparing women suffering that had been considered inevitable. Dental care became accessible to people who had previously avoided it due to fear of pain. Modern medicine would be unthinkable without anesthesia, which enables everything from organ transplants to cancer surgery. Billions of people over the past 175 years have benefited from painless medical procedures made possible by Wells's discovery. Nitrous oxide, the agent Wells first used, remains in medical use today for dental procedures and minor surgeries. Every patient who undergoes general anesthesia owes a debt to the Hartford dentist who sacrificed his own tooth to prove the concept. The theft of credit from Wells exemplifies a pattern in medical history where true innovators are often eclipsed by those better positioned for recognition. Morton had better connections to the Boston medical establishment and understood how to market his demonstrations for maximum impact. Charles Jackson had academic credentials that made his claims more credible to medical authorities. Wells was a small-town dentist without institutional backing or political skills necessary to fight for his rightful place in history. The scientific community often rewards those who can promote themselves rather than those who actually make discoveries. The psychological destruction Wells experienced reflects the devastating impact of professional betrayal and historical injustice. He had made a discovery that should have brought fame, fortune, and professional respect, yet received only humiliation and poverty. Watching others profit from stealing his innovation while he struggled financially and professionally created unbearable psychological pain. The medical establishment's refusal to acknowledge his priority despite clear evidence compounded his sense of injustice. His descent into mental illness and addiction was directly caused by these professional traumas. The story of Wells also reveals the dangers of self-experimentation in medical research. His willingness to have his own tooth extracted under experimental anesthesia demonstrated remarkable courage but also set a dangerous precedent. Many medical pioneers throughout history have injured or killed themselves through self-experimentation with untested treatments. Wells himself became addicted to chloroform through his experiments with different anesthetic agents. The line between scientific heroism and self-destructive obsession can be dangerously thin. The legal battles over anesthesia patents that followed Wells's death consumed the lives of Morton and Jackson as well. Morton spent decades fighting for exclusive patent rights and died impoverished and embittered in 1868. Charles Jackson also ended his life in a psychiatric asylum, his mind destroyed by obsessive litigation and professional disputes. The three men most associated with anesthesia discovery all suffered tragic fates, as if the blessing they gave humanity came with a curse for those who touched it. This pattern suggests that the early anesthesia story involved toxic levels of ambition, betrayal, and mental illness. Connecticut eventually honored Wells with monuments and historical markers acknowledging his discovery of anesthesia. The American Dental Association established the Horace Wells Award for contributions to anesthesiology. Medical historians have written extensively about the injustice of his treatment and his rightful claim to priority. Hartford recognizes him as one of the city's most important historical figures, despite his tragic end. These honors represent society's attempt to correct the historical wrong that destroyed Wells during his lifetime. The question of whether earlier recognition could have saved Wells from his tragic fate remains unanswerable. If the Boston demonstration had succeeded, his life trajectory would have been completely different. If the medical establishment had acknowledged his priority before Morton's theft, he might have achieved the success he deserved. If colleagues and medical societies had supported his claims rather than dismissing them, his mental health might have remained stable. The counterfactual possibilities highlight how differently history might have unfolded with small changes in circumstances. Today, every surgical patient who receives anesthesia benefits from Horace Wells's courage and insight. Every dentist who administers nitrous oxide uses the technique Wells pioneered. Every medical student who learns about anesthesia should know the name of the man who discovered it at the cost of his sanity and life. The operating rooms where painless surgery saves lives daily are monuments to Wells's genius, even if his name is rarely spoken there. Horace Wells's hidden genius gave humanity the gift of painless surgery, one of the greatest contributions to human welfare in medical history. Yet he died in agony in a prison cell, driven insane by the theft of his discovery and the refusal of the medical establishment to acknowledge his achievement. His story is a tragic reminder that scientific progress often comes at the cost of those who make it possible, and that history frequently celebrates the wrong heroes while forgetting the true pioneers who suffered for their innovations.